The wine was red like blood when it splashed across her white silk dress, and the room froze for half a second before laughter exploded, sharp, cruel, entitled laughter from crystal glasses and diamond throats. The rich boy was smiling wide, proud, drunk on power as if he had just performed a trick, and the woman stood still, not screaming, not crying, not reacting at all, which somehow made it worse for them because humiliation was supposed to break her, and when it did not, the boy scoffed and said loudly that waitresses should watch where they stand, and his mother laughed first, covering her mouth, pretending elegance, while her eyes scanned the room for approval, and his father followed with a slow clap, the kind meant to remind everyone who owned the air in that hall, and nobody noticed the way the woman slowly lifted her eyes, calm, unreadable, ancient, like she had seen empires fall before, and she took a breath, not to steady herself, but to decide something important. The gala was meant to save the family business, a desperate night wrapped in gold, a last attempt to secure funding for their collapsing empire. 500 million was the number hanging over every chandelier like a guillotine, unspoken but heavy. The guests were powerful bankers, politicians, media sharks, all circling like vultures, pretending to dance while waiting to see who would bleed, and the family believed tonight was theirs. The son believed the world was his playground. He had never been told no, not by schools, not by women, not by consequences, and certainly not by a woman standing alone without jewels or entourage. He leaned closer, mocking, asking if she even knew whose party this was, and still she said nothing, which made him laugh harder and pour the rest of the wine down her front while the family watched, pleased, because dominance had been displayed. And then something shifted, not loudly, not dramatically, but subtly, like a temperature change. The music continued, the laughter thinned, and the woman finally spoke softly enough that only those closest heard. Yet the room leaned in without realizing why she said thank you. And confusion rippled because gratitude was not part of the script. She reached into her clutch, not to clean herself, but to retrieve a simple black phone, no gold, no case, no logo. She tapped once and looked directly at the father and asked if he had enjoyed the last 6 months of delayed payments. The smile slid off his face like wax under heat. She turned to the mother and asked if she slept well, knowing how many jobs would vanish if tonight failed. The mother stiffened and the son laughed, nervously asking what game she thought she was playing, and that was when she said the words that would later be replayed in every boardroom, news channel, and courtroom in the country. She said, "I am the reason you are here tonight. I am the reason your banks still answer your calls, and I am the reason this building still has lights." And for the first time, silence truly fell. Not polite silence, but fear silence, the kind that arrives when power enters a room without asking permission, and she finally wiped the wine from her dress. Not in embarrassment, but like someone clearing a board before a final move. And she smiled not at the boy, but at the future she was about to erase. Silence stretched across the ballroom, thick and suffocating, as if the air itself had decided to wait and see what would happen next. The orchestra kept playing because no one had told them to stop, but the notes sounded wrong now, too cheerful, too ignorant of the quiet panic blooming behind forced smiles. The father cleared his throat, attempting authority, attempting control, but his voice cracked just enough to betray him, and he asked who she thought she was addressing, as if titles still mattered, as if hierarchy could protect him. And the woman finally turned fully toward him, posture relaxed, shoulders straight, eyes steady. She introduced herself without raising her voice, and yet it carried farther than the music, farther than the whispers. She spoke her name, and some people frowned because it sounded familiar, while others stiffened because they already knew. And across the room a banker dropped his glass, a senator stopped mid-laugh, a media executive slowly reached for his phone. The son tried to interrupt, calling it a joke, calling her crazy. But no one laughed this time because power had shifted and everyone could feel it like a floor tilting beneath their feet. She explained calmly that her firm had acquired the family's debt quietly, patiently over the past year, that every extension, every delay, every miracle loan had not come from generosity, but from her signature, and with Each sentence faces paled because they understood now why she had been invited last minute without fanfare. Why her seat had been placed near the front, why security had let her pass without question. The mother whispered something to her husband. Frantic prayers or excuses no one could tell, and the boy suddenly looked small, not because he had shrunk, but because the world had grown teeth and he had never learned how to survive outside applause. The woman continued explaining that tonight had been their final evaluation, not of profits or projections, but of character, because money could be rebuilt, reputations could be repaired, but cruelty always revealed rot, and she gestured gently to her stained dress and said this was enough. Data for her decision cameras were now openly raised, no longer hidden behind champagne flutes. The guests smelled blood, not hers, but the families, and the father attempted one last stand, offering apologies. Donations, partnerships, anything but she shook her head slowly, almost kindly, and said respect was not negotiable and dignity was not for sale. She pressed a button on her phone, and somewhere deep in the building servers updated contracts. Expired accounts froze and futures collapsed, all without sound, without drama, just lines of code executing consequences. The son finally understood, falling to his knees, not literally but spiritually, his bravado drained, replaced by terror as he begged, stammered. Blamed alcohol, blamed misunderstanding, blamed everyone but himself, and she looked at him not with hatred but with disappointment which cut deeper than rage, because hatred acknowledges importance and disappointment does not. And she told him softly that this was not revenge, this was governance, and that leaders were measured by how they treated those they believed powerless. And then she turned away, walking through the crowd as people parted instinctively, making space for authority, and behind her the empire began to crumble. Not with explosions, but with emails, phone calls, and irreversible silence. The aftermath did not arrive like thunder, it came like a slow, cold tide, creeping across marble floors and into private offices where assistants stared at screens, refreshing accounts that no longer existed. Legal teams flooded inboxes with language too late to save anything, and the ballroom emptied faster than it had filled, not because the party was over, but because no one wanted to be present at a collapse history has a way of choosing witnesses and discarding the rest. The family remained frozen at their table, the father sitting as his spine had turned to glass, staring at nothing, the mother whispering prayers she had not spoken in years, and the son pacing, frantic, trapped between denial and realization, replaying the moment again and again, searching for the second where things could have gone differently, as if time might listen and reset. But it would not, because time only moves forward, especially when money is involved. Outside the building, reporters gathered, sensing the shift before official statements confirmed it. Markets respond faster to fear than facts, and by morning the family's stock would bleed red across every ticker. Meanwhile, the woman moved through the exit unnoticed. Now, not because she lacked presence, but because the crowd had turned inward, each guest calculating distance, association, survival. She stepped into the night air, cool, cleansing, and paused not to celebrate, but to breathe, because power is heavy, even when it is deserved. Her driver opened the door, but she delayed one moment, making a call not to press advantage, but to instruct restraint, because collapse did not require cruelty, and justice did not require spectacle. She told her team to protect employees, to preserve pensions, to ensure the innocent did not pay for the arrogance of a few. Because leadership was not about humiliation, it was about responsibility. Inside the building, the son finally collapsed into a chair, sweat soaking his collar, makeup from a stranger's cheek still smeared on his sleeve, symbols of a life that no longer fit. The father whispered that they could fight this court appeals, public sympathy, but even as he spoke, he knew it was over, because their leverage had always been money, and money now answered to her name. The mother finally looked toward the exit, where the woman had disappeared, and asked a question that hung unanswered. Who was she really? And the truth was simple yet unbearable. She was exactly who she had appeared to be. Someone who expected respect and documented everything else, and as the lights dimmed and staff began clearing tables, removing flowers that would never wilt in photographs, the family understood that empires do not fall from enemies, they fall from entitlement. And somewhere across the city, the woman sat in the back of a quiet car, watching lights pass, thinking not of victory, but of balance, knowing the story would be told as revenge, but the lesson would be deeper and far more expensive. Morning arrived without mercy. Headlines spread faster than sunrise. Screens across the city lit up with the same story told in different tones. Scandal, shock, downfall, karma. Analysts dissected timelines while commentators debated morality. But the numbers told the clearest truth. 500 million vanished like breath on glass. Banks issued statements distancing themselves, partners, suspended contracts, and allies suddenly forgot shared dinners and old favors inside the family's headquarters. Employees gathered in hushed clusters, fear replacing routines. Some cried, others stared numb at desks decorated with years of loyalty that now felt like a mistake. Executives tempted damage control, issuing apologies drafted by lawyers that sounded hollow even to their own ears, because sincerity cannot be reverse engineered. The sun woke late. Head pounding, phone buzzing endlessly, messages unread because none offered escape. He scrolled through social media, watching his name turn into a symbol, a meme, a lesson. Strangers judging a life they had only glimpsed but somehow fully understood. Shame arrived heavy, unfamiliar, and he realized for the first time that money had always shielded him from consequences. And now that shield was gone, the father spent the day on calls, begging, negotiating, threatening, promising futures. He no longer controlled. Each call ended the same way, with polite condolences and firm refusals. Power once lost does not return through noise, it returns through humility. And humility had never been their currency. The mother retreated inward, replaying the laugh that had escaped her lips the night before, realizing it had echoed farther than she ever intended. Meanwhile, across town, the woman sat in a quiet boardroom. Walls bare, table clean, no celebration, no champagne, just focus. Her team reviewed outcomes, carefully adjusting steps to stabilize what could be saved. She insisted on transparency, instructing that every decision be documented, because the difference between justice and abuse is accountability, and she would not become what she dismantled later. She stood alone by the window, watching the city move, indifferent to individual tragedies. Because cities always survive, people change or disappear. She allowed herself one moment of reflection, not regret, but resolve, knowing she had been underestimated her entire career, mistaken for quiet, mistaken for soft, and each time she had learned that silence is often mistaken for weakness by those who speak the loudest and listen the least. As night fell, the family home remained lit long after neighbors slept. Meetings, arguments, accusations bouncing off walls lined with art that would soon be appraised, sold, divided, and the son finally understood the cost of a single careless moment, not measured in money but in legacy, because history would remember the wine, the laughter, and the woman who never raised her voice. It ended. Everything. Days passed, and the city adjusted as it always does. Scandal becomes routine when another headline arrives, but for those inside, the collapse time moved differently, stretched, distorted every hour, carrying weight. The company officially entered restructuring, a gentle word for dismantling offices emptied quietly. Boxes carried out without ceremony, security badges deactivated mid-conversation. The father aged visibly, shoulders bent under a shame he could not outsource, and for the first time, he questioned every lesson he had passed to his son, realizing success without ethics was a debt that always demanded payment. The son attempted apologies, public and private, some drafted, some spontaneous, none effective. Because remorse spoken after consequence sounds like strategy, not truth. He tried to reach the woman, directly, believing a personal plea might soften her, but her assistant declined, politely explaining that decisions had already been made and that governance was not personal. The rejection cut deeper than anger because it confirmed irrelevance. Meanwhile, employees began to understand that pensions would be protected, jobs transitioned, new leadership installed stability. Where chaos had threatened and slowly resentment shifted direction away from the woman and toward the arrogance that had endangered them all, she never appeared on talk shows, never issued victory statements. She let systems speak for her because real power does not need narration, and in private moments, she reflected on her own journey, the mentors who taught her that respect is currency, the failures that taught her patience, the nights spent overlooked, dismissed, underestimated, each one sharpening her resolve not to mirror the cruelty. She visited a small foundation she funded anonymously, supporting young professionals from backgrounds like hers, reminding herself why she built power in the first place, not to dominate, but to ensure no one could humiliate her or others without consequence. Across the city, the family's name was removed from buildings, scholarships, quietly renamed portraits taken down without comment. Legacy unraveled thread by thread, and the son finally accepted that forgiveness was not owed, it was earned through change, and change takes time and pain. As evening settled, the woman reviewed one final report confirming the transition was complete, and she closed the file not with satisfaction but with calm, knowing the lesson would travel farther than the story. That dignity once violated never forgets, and power once revealed never needs to shout. Weeks turned into months, and the noise faded, leaving behind consequences that could not be muted. The company emerged, smaller, steadier, under leadership chosen for competence, not pedigree. Employees slowly rebuilt trust, learning that survival was possible without spectacle. The father withdrew from public life, selling assets, quietly avoiding interviews because explanations no longer mattered. The son entered a different world, stripped of privilege. Forced to confront himself without applause, he took a job no one recognized his name at. Learned structure, learned restraint, learned that respect is given in moments, not inherited at birth. The process was slow, uncomfortable, and for the first time, real. Meanwhile, the woman continued her work, expanding quietly, investing carefully, building systems that rewarded integrity. She declined awards, declined profiles, declined the temptation to become a symbol, because symbols invite distortion. She preferred impact, measurable, sustained, unseen. Occasionally, she remembered the gala, not with bitterness, but as confirmation that values reveal themselves under pressure, and people show who they are when they think no one powerful is watching. She mentored young leaders, teaching them that authority is a responsibility, not a weapon, that wealth without ethics is liability, that silence paired with preparation is formidable. The city moved on, new scandals, new villains, new heroes, but the lesson lingered in boardrooms and classrooms, whispered as cautionary tale, not about revenge, but about respect. And somewhere one evening she attended a small gathering. Not a gala, just conversation, laughter, humility, and when a server accidentally spilled a drink on her sleeve, the room froze, waiting to see what power would do. She smiled, helped clean the mess, and thanked them sincerely, because true authority never needs to prove itself. Years later, the story was told without names, because names distract from lessons. Business schools used it to explain ethics. Journalists referenced it as a turning point, and parents told it quietly to children as warning and wisdom. The woman never corrected the myths, never confirmed details. She allowed distance to soften drama into meaning, because time reveals what spectacle cannot. The family became a footnote, not villains, not victims. It's just an example of what happens when power forgets humanity. The son eventually built a modest life, one defined not by inheritance, but by effort. And when he spoke of the past, he did so without excuses. Acknowledging harm without expecting forgiveness, the father passed quietly, his empire reduced to memories and mistakes, and the mother devoted herself to causes she once dismissed, learning late but sincerely the value of empathy. Meanwhile, the woman continued, shaping industries, influencing policy, protecting livelihoods without raising her voice, without staining silk dresses, because she had learned long ago that the most devastating power is exercised calmly, consistently. and with purpose, and the gala became legend, not for the wine or the laughter, but for the moment. The room learned that respect is not optional, and cruelty always sends an invoice and someone always pays.